Hello, and welcome to another episode of TacoBytes, your daily bite of Degen, episode number 596. Decentralized AI with Morpheus, and we have David with us today to sort of talk about everything that Morpheus is doing and what everything is going on. GM, David, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Man, it is... It's been about 2 months since, or a month and a half maybe, since I saw you at ETH Denver and we got to finally officially meet. ETH Denver was a big thing for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. There was a huge decentralized AI day. The whole presence there was tons of people from the Morpheus community, all the protocols working on different parts of the tech stack. It was wild.
Yeah. And not only that, but you ended up having your own DAI day, as I like to say, decentralized AI, that was such, I don't want to say success, but maybe overwhelming amount of people that had interest in it, that it went from a 1-day event to a 2-day event.
Yeah. No, it was wild. I think 1,500 people applied, and we only had space for 500 people at the first venue. So yeah, we were like, hey, we should try to open this up to the community. I ended up with this huge venue for the second day, and hundreds of more people flowed through. So it was cool to sort of let as many people as possible, connect directly with the people building the different parts of the DAI tech stack.
Yeah, man, and there's a lot going on there too, because it's the whole point of it is a decentralized collective. But you had used the term almost like an atomic vote or something like that.
I think you're thinking of atomic governance. Yeah,
atomic governance.
Really cool aspect of what was in the Morpheus paper and is in the Techno Capital Machine paper is this idea of just creating a free marketplace for governance, right? So anybody can volunteer to be a maintainer. They can build part of the code. They sort of act as like a judge of what gets included, and as far as the upgrades to the reference clients, and it sort of removes so much of the bureaucracy of votes and DAOs and a lot of stuff like that, where I think people have sort of conflated this idea that because it should be permissionless, everybody has to participate in everything. Whereas, in a free market, you get specialization, and you want the expert that's deepest down the rabbit hole on that particular thing to make a decision and build something, right? And we all have a free choice if we want to use it or not, right? And that's the cool thing about Morpheus. It's an entirely modular system. So you can pick your own models, you can pick which smart agents you want to use. If you want to opt into code, it doesn't mandate anything. Short of adopting the tokenomics, you can basically plug and play any part of the ecosystem that you want. You want to hook into the compute, go for it. You want to use the smart contracts to, get capital for your own open source project with more 20, go for it, right? You don't need anybody's permission to do those things. And so you've sort of shrunk the scope of where do you need to do coordination? Where do you need to do consensus to as few things as possible? So people are just free to build. They don't have to go through a bureaucratic process.
Yeah. One of the things that I really like about it too, is the aspect of, when it comes to DAOs and voting and community governance, do you want individuals that some sort of tasks are very specific as well? If you were to somehow make a medical DAO, and a decision-based DAO, of medical procedures, you want doctors sort of making that decision, not a guy, and nothing against Holiday Inn Express, but you don't want that guy that sat at the Holiday Inn Express to make that decision of what might be the best medical procedure. And so it makes it very targeted, and it makes it adaptable as well, because it doesn't have to keep living after those decisions are made.
Right.
And it can restart and be sort of reabsorbed by the group and then go about till the next task.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
I think that's the key, is to sort of have like individual decisions where people can express their preferences and take actions, right, in this atomic format, and just go and get value out of that, right?
Yeah.
And we're all going to have different interests and things that we want to do with these AIs, right? So I think the key is to have a personal AI that is literally just an extension of my data, my Web3 wallet, right? So ultimately, I'm approving the transactions that happen. And it was funny when I was first talking to Eric Voorhees about this idea in September of last year after the white paper got posted. It was like, oh, yeah, that's a really good point. A private key is like one of the few things a AI is never going to replicate, right? As long as our understanding of the laws of physics is good enough, entropy is on our side, thermodynamics is on our side. Like there's no amount of compute or intelligence on the part of an AI that's going to break cryptography, right? Certainly quantum cryptography. And so, we have that as sort of this cool way to do like a proof of human, or like what's the proof, like this is what I intended to do, is like, okay, I can tell the AI what it wants to do, and then it can propose an action and I can approve it. Right. And I think that's the right flow, to have these smart agents connected into our Web3 wallets as the way to prove that mathematically.
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick second to roll back because I forgot to do something. I want to thank everyone for joining us on Twitter, Twitter video, LinkedIn, Player One Taco, YouTube, 0x Degens YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Kick, Telegram, Discord, and on-chain via Unlonely. But if you guys are in Twitter, please leave comments if you have questions. We're going to go through a bunch of stuff. If you are watching on video, we can see your comments. If you're on X, if you're watching through X video, we can see your comments and we can touch on those as well. Same if you're on YouTube or on Twitch, we can see those comments. Unfortunately, I don't have. I'm traveling, so I don't have 5 screens up, so I don't have all the other apps up for questions. But I think that we've sort of brought it down, here. Definitely, if you guys are in the Twitter space, the video is of if you want to see what David looks like, the voice, the video is in the Jumbotron, so you can follow along, or you can just listen. David, I did do a little housekeeping, and I muted you on Twitter Space because you were echoing on both sides. But this way, you had that reverb that was like, yeah, the voice. And so I did a little housekeeping there. So now we're back to that. But everyone can hear you just fine. It just looks like my voice changes sometimes.
All good, man. Thanks for hosting. And this is really cool setup. I haven't seen somebody that's really been able to plug in all these different channels instantly and together.
Oh, dude, I actually tried to work with the StreamYard team because I had a funny, stupid goal of, can I stream to 100 locations at once?
Right.
They're like, no. No. And I was like, but you didn't even say like it would cost this much. But yeah, no. And so, yeah, no, this is the 596th episode of this thing. And so I've been doing a bunch of different shows, but this one was sort of my fun one. And as soon as we met, I was like, I want to talk with you because I want people to hear what you have to say. And I want to tear things apart. I want to have fun, but I also want to get people involved, And right now, unfortunately, one of the big metas is everyone's like, okay, how's this going to make me money? I acted like I was going to put a whole bunch of different things there, but it's just that really, because the UI, in my opinion, isn't fully there yet for people to interact daily consistently. I can just press my phone button and hold it long enough, and I get Siri, no, I don't get Siri. I don't use iPhones, but I can get Bixby or I can get Google, and we don't have that yet when it comes to Web3.
Exactly. No, I think that's been one of the big holdups for mass adoption, is you have to be still fairly technical to access all these systems. And I actually think that's what these AI chat interfaces will give us is an ability to have just a normal conversation, right? Just say in natural human language what you want to do, and it can understand that in the intent, right? That's the beautiful thing about a large language model. Like it gets it. Okay, I understand what you're trying to do. And then once you have that intent, you can map it to those actions. And the user doesn't have to have ever heard of Lido or know how smart contracts work to just say, hey, I want to stake my ETH. I heard that's a thing. I can earn some yield on my Ethereum and I'll hold my Ethereum. I don't know how to do that. How do I do that? And all of a sudden you have a system that say, sure, here's Lido. I've lined up the transaction. Push this button on MetaMask, and you'll stake. How many ETH do you want to stake? 1, 2, whatever. And now all of a sudden it's done. And I've removed all the technical barriers from accessing crypto in Web3. And that reminds me so much of like the early days of the internet. It was janky back in the day, but as soon as Google showed up, it was like, oh, there's a magic box. I just tell it what I want, and it's going to take me somewhere on the internet that's pretty good, and I can pick, ultimately which link I want to go to. And so I think we got to get back to that same experience for Web3.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever got into it. Did you ever get into the I'm feeling lucky button on Google?
The one that takes you to like whatever the top result is. Yeah,
random things, like, and it was a really funny thing. And when I say that, I say the magic word of Google, it opens up everywhere on all my phones. So what is Morpheus?
So I think of Morpheus for smart agents, what Ethereum is for smart contracts, right? It's a platform for people to be able to deploy these systems and basically handle all of the infrastructure, right? Ethereum's not writing any smart contracts, right? Aave wrote their own smart contracts, Compound, Uniswap. These are all independent teams. Ethereum just gave people an easy place to launch their smart contracts, right? It handled all the consensus and execution, all the details of how smart contracts work, right? The EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine. It gave them that platform, and people didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time they wanted to launch a smart contract, right? The idea of a world computer was pretty compelling. Like, yeah, I just want to write smart contracts. I just want to write programs and deploy them on a blockchain. Like, Bitcoin wasn't built for that, right? And when Vitalik proposed doing that on Bitcoin, the developers like, get out of here, kid. Like, that's not what it's for. And so he launched Ethereum, right? Something that was built day one for programs and scripts and running those. And so that was really a successful model. Everybody before Ethereum was trying to bake the functions directly into the protocol. Yep. Like, oh, this will be popular. We'll build it right into the protocol. But then you limited the group of people that can contribute, just like a few core developers, instead of a huge community that want to just do their own projects. And so Morpheus, I think of it in the same way, right? Right now, people are building AI like it's 2012 and you got to build everything into the protocol. And it's like, no, just make a marketplace platform that anybody can use. And people are going to make DeFi agents. They're going to make meme agents. They're going to make NFT agents, like anything you can imagine. They don't try to build those in as pre-baked features. Just create the marketplace, right, for these smart agents. And I think that's the key. And people are realizing this combination of AI and crypto is going to be really powerful. And so now they're imagining what to do with that. But today you really kind of have to roll your own, platform to do a lot of these things. So Morpheus just makes it easy for anybody that just wants to access the compute or access capital, right? All these parts of the platform without having to write their own smart contracts, without having to build their own system.
Yeah. You touched on a bunch of things, and I'm gonna roll us back. We talked about the simplistic way of just participating right now. One of the active ways of participating is staking your ETH. Now, I'm gonna do my best to explain this, and so tell me when I'm off. But I still get hold control with any staking protocol. I'm putting up my own capital, but I get to recall that capital at any time. Where Morpheus has set up a little bit different is instead of me receiving the emissions from my work, that those emissions are going to Morpheus specifically for the More 20 token. And now, is
Right.
More 20 going to be the token, or is that going to be the standard?
So More 20 is the standard. It's the easy way for anybody who wants to do a fair launch, just like Morpheus did, right? So they can leverage the same smart contracts, dashboards, audits that have already secured, $400 million in staked ETH for their project, right?
Mhm.
And so they can skip 6 months of development and a bunch of expensive audits and just let their community provide staked ETH, donate that yield, like you said, into the protocol and liquidity, and use that as the bootstrapping method to sort of sustainably create, access for capital for a new open source project. So that's the More 20 standard. The Morpheus token itself is called MOR or More. And like you said, everybody providing staked ETH today is competing, right, with everybody else providing staked ETH, and they're getting more tokens in proportion to how much of the staked ETH that they're providing. So if they're providing 1% of the staked ETH that day, great, they get 1% of the more rewards that are emitted that day, right? And I really like that model because people aren't putting their ETH at risk. I mean, there's always smart contract risk, but they're not handing it to a counterparty. It's not
Mhm.
going to some centralized team. Like you said, after 7 days, you can just withdraw your ETH whenever you want. And if I wasn't staking anyway and I was holding ETH, I might as well, support a cool open source project that I want to see exist. I've got the same number of Ethereum I started with, and now I'm earning tokens in this new project for donating the yield.
Yeah, and that's like, putting your money to work, you know,
Yeah.
and and that's sort of, one of the tools, we can. I want to, if we get into any dicey stuff, let me know. But I sort of try to cover everything, especially, people are like, on the security or regulatory conscious side of things. But that's actually putting their money to work and not just sitting back on the tenets of the Howey test but through no effort of their own. And so failing or passing failing the Howey test is one of the biggest things to help protect a project from not being a security. And so that's one of those things to where you're actively participating in it. A random question I had that was sent to me, and I don't know if you guys have thought about this at all, but a tax perspective.
Mm.
Have you thought about that as like someone asked, like, how would I assign this to my tax guy then?
It's a really interesting question. And there's so many different tax jurisdictions, it's almost impossible to answer or speculate on. But what I can say is that if you look at the smart contracts and if you understand the mechanism, you're not getting sent more.
Yep.
You've earned some, but you choose when to claim it, right?
Yep.
So you have to send a transaction in and say, "Hey, I'm claiming my rewards," and so they're not going to show up in your address automatically. It shouldn't, it be perceived as income. It's you're putting in this capital, right?
Yep.
You're earning these tokens, and you're choosing when to receive them,
Yeah.
right? And that's really compelling because it doesn't sort of force you on the timing to decide, oh, you got it every day or you got it every month. It's a reward that's out there and you can claim it, but you can decide on the timing, right? And in a lot of tax jurisdictions, that's an important question is like, when did you actually receive the asset, right?
Yep.
So you can compete for it for a long time, but you get to decide when to receive it.
Yep.
And so, in most jurisdictions, capital gains is better than income. There's all these sort of, questions that are out there. But I think your point about, the security is really important, right? And Morpheus is interesting that there is no company. There's no foundation. Nobody knows who the anonymous authors of the papers were. There's no pre-mine, right? There's no formal team. It's literally the only more that will exist are people that earned them from contributing to the open source or provided state ETH, right? And so you've removed every counterparty conceivable and central point of failure from this system. And there's no treasury, there's nobody handing out money. Like the yield itself isn't going to a team. There's no, pot of money that some developers are getting. All of that yield is going into the protocol and liquidity and can never come out, right? So it's just adding to the liquidity of the network and creating this constant buy in the system for the Moore tokens. So anybody that got them for compute or front ends or building the code, they have a place where they can go onto the Uniswap AMM, right, on Arbitrum and sell some more and get liquidity. But there's been no counterparty created, right? That protocol and liquidity is sort of a genius way to take all the yield and manage it in a fully decentralized manner.
Yeah. And we were talking TGE earlier on the competitive party to this of everyone staking ETH, and you're in competition with other people. And so not to dissuade anyone, but there's an amazing Dune dashboard of the allocations of staked ETH per party. And I don't remember the amount of people that are staking ETH, but I know
I think it's north of 5,000 now.
5,000 people. I know the largest contributor individual wallet per se is roughly around it was either 4.8 or 5.2%. So it's not like a whale's day, which is pretty cool to see. But seeing such a large amount from the community come together, because I know the minimum is 0.011 or 12, if I remember right, and from there, that's roughly like $35 right now, maybe. Sure. But that's setting someone up to participate in this and get their ETH back at the end of the day whenever they want. Well, 7 days, and it goes through an unbonding period. So my question also on that is that 7 days from when I stake it, or do I have to start an unbonding process to start that 7-day clock?
You don't have to do any unbonding process. So it's just 7 days after you first staked it. And keep in mind, if you make another deposit, it restarts that 7-day clock, because the 7-day clock is attached to the address, not to each transaction. So if you keep upping, just look at whatever day you made the last deposit, 7 days after that, you can do the withdrawal. And the only reason to have any 7-day period at all is, imagine if you could deposit it and then earn some more, but withdraw it right before the rebase happens, right? Because for those unfamiliar with how Lido works, it gives out the rewards at 12 noon GMT every day. That's your rebase, right? And so a tiny little bit of additional yield lands in that address. And so if you could just withdraw at any time, the yield would never get to the protocol and liquidity. People could steal that yield away from the protocol, still be earning more rewards, and sort of trick the system. So there has to be some amount of lock-in. And a lot of the community is like, all right, well, what's the shortest possible period where people really can't play that game? I mean, they can if they want, but they'll probably lose money due to fees and stuff like that. It doesn't make sense, right? And so 7 days was like, okay, you've put it in long enough. There's been 7 rebase reward periods. Real yield has gone to the protocol. If you want to pull out whenever you want, right? But that's the only reason to have any period for locking it up at all, is just so people can't play games with pretending to contribute yield but not really contributing yield. And to your point, there's this really cool thing if you think through the game theory. So yes, now there's 120,000 staked ETH all competing. And people say, oh, well, how am I going to compete? But every new staked ETH is providing yield. And that is a proportional amount of more demand for the more token. Because again, what's that yield being used for? It's buying more out of the Uniswap pool every day and adding that to the protocol owned liquidity. So would you rather own one token worth $100? Or would you rather own 10 tokens worth $10? It's
or 100 tokens worth $1.
Right. Exactly. It's the same thing. So if you imagine, Sarah, when only 1,000 staked ETH had come in, yes, there'd be less competition and you'd get more units, but there'd also be that much less demand for the token. So whether it's 1,000 staked ETH or 100,000 staked ETH, it's really proportional in the amount of demand because you're creating more demand for the token. Right.
Yeah.
So all that's happening is smaller fraction of Morpheus are becoming more valuable. And so, people I think are going to brag one day about being whole coiners of Morpheus, right? Because if that's how scarcity works, you want it to be scarce. And the cool thing is the
Like the
bigger
whole
it
coiners of
grows,
Bitcoin.
yeah, exactly, exactly, right. And so, that's the real benefit is a deeper liquidity, more rewards for everybody else in the ecosystem. And so that competition is a good thing. People should be celebrating every time more staked ETH comes in because that's more rewards for the whole system to become successful.
Yeah. No, and that's a very interesting aspect. And one of the things I really like about it is the aspect that it's a community growth token. The more that's put in, the more token there is, but at the same time, the more value is to the token.
Yep.
And hey, it could just all be zero.
Yep. There's no guarantees. Like it's crypto. But it's been really cool to see how much support there's been from the community. But that's also created this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where the coders have seen how much the rewards are worth. And there's been a flood of cool new contributors coming in, right? From the original, 100 plus coders to now I think it's getting close to 200 people have contributed code, even groups like Lumerin, who spent years and millions of dollars building incredible code with their decentralized router. They're like, hey, we want to put that into Morpheus. We want to earn those rewards. We want to be part of what's going on. And so you're attracting all this top talent to be involved in building it out.
Yeah. Let's I want to roll into smart agents now.
Sure.
The idea of a smart agent in comparison to a smart contract, a token can have any, the command line is if A happens, B, C, D, and you can see what happens there. Smart agents bring out almost a little bit of chaos in my opinion, because yes, it is defined with an end goal. How it gets there, who knows sometimes. But working really in an open source manner, are all projects, all smart agents open source within Morpheus?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything in the entire tech stack from the open source model, whether you're using Llama or News Termes or any of the other great open source models, but that's open source. The interfaces are open source. The smart agents themselves are open source. And so, yeah, you're getting a lot more transparency than you are today if you're using something like OpenAI, which is proprietary closed source, and you have no idea how it's operating in the back end or what it's doing with your data.
Yeah, I love the fact with OpenAI they actually use like children's psychologists asking it questions to sort of see how it came to certain conclusions and stuff. And so the fact that they're giving they're doing psychology on an AI just sort of like blows your mind in the aspect of we weren't going to be thinking that a year and a half ago,
Sure.
Were there people that thought that? Oh yeah, they knew that was going to happen. But at a public level, now AI has I don't want to say infiltrated, but has been accepted in so many different patterns and different ways. I just bought a new phone the other day, and the new Samsung S24 has like all of the Samsung AI in it. I didn't get that. I went down a couple models, but I got like a pamphlet with it, of like everything else Samsung has. And they're introducing their AI into their dishwasher, their fridge, their oven, their stove. And I'm like, now I could see that being in my Roomba, but my dishwasher? Okay, let's go with this,
Yep. Well, the cost of intelligence has gotten so low. And so now you can afford to put it in almost everything. And what does that do for you, right? It's just added convenience. Okay, now my dishwasher is smart enough to know its maintenance period has come up. Like, call and schedule the maintenance guy. Like, same thing with like your fridge. Like, okay, great. It knows we're out of tomatoes and I wanted to rebook the tomatoes every week. Now I don't have to think or work on that. And so it's like all of this is sort of just an extension of 10,000-year journey people have been on ever since agriculture and writing and civilization is like, how can I focus on higher value things? And I'm happy I wasn't born 1,000 years ago. I could have been a potato farmer in Ireland, literally never leaving the place I was born and never had the opportunity to read books. Like, I'm glad that we've been able to make almost all of agriculture now robotic.
Yeah.
Something like 2% of people still work in agriculture, and it feeds 100% of people. To me, that's an amazing victory. And then, okay, people moved into factories. I'm okay that we're making those robotic factories because, factories can be dangerous and difficult. And so I'm glad that I can work on knowledge and information and computer systems. And so if we build these systems well, they should enable a huge wave of abundance like we've never seen, right? But we need them to be honest. We need to be transparent because a lot of what's happened the last 50 years is people haven't seen the benefits of capitalism. They haven't seen the benefit of this golden age of automation because corruption of the money, right? Or banning cheap power for nuclear because of fear of the side effects, you've lost out on all these benefits and they've accrued to a very small number of people. And that's the kind of thing that's really inspired me when it comes to crypto is we can return to a fair system that's transparent, that anybody can participate in a permissionless way, but can't be corrupted by centralized powers.
And you said a good line there that I might use, here and there, but the benefits of capitalism, and you cleaned it up really well too, saying that money gets corrupted along the way, and that's true. And there's that what absolute power corrupts or something like that,
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's sort of one of those fears in the idea of decentralized AI, and that is where like projects like Morpheus, Manifest, TLI, and Lifted Labs, and 6079, and the list goes on. Are working to keep not just AI decentralized but accessible. And right. I think one of the aspects that's really cool is when you were talking earlier, you're sort of talking about a marketplace. I don't necessarily need one AI that can do everything because it might not be able to do everything well because the amount of compute power for that is amazing. But a specialized AI that focuses on certain things,
Yep.
You specifically mentioned like a DeFi trading bot.
Sure. I mean, imagine this like the App Store. Your phone doesn't come pre-installed with everything you want to do on it, right? And Apple doesn't try to predict which apps you're going to want. It just gives you this big open market and say anybody can release a cool app and great, anybody can download them. That's what I want for AI. The foundation models can be pretty smart, but they're not specialized, right? They're not trained on every smart contract and stuff like that. And so this idea of having smart agents, I want to use hundreds of them. I want to use thousands of them, depending on whatever I'm doing. And then you have a marketplace where any developer can build and release these smart agents and get rewarded for it. Think of them almost like this concept of non-fungible agents has come out really recently, which I think is cool. If you read Morpheus Request for Comment MRC 21, you'll see all the write up on this. But you've got a unique address for this agent. It was built by a team to do a unique thing, right? It can be released, and then people can support this NFA, and they can also use this NFA in an open marketplace. And we already have all the infrastructure from what's been built for 721 NFTs.
Mhm.
And it's sort of just an extension of that to add all of these AI capabilities to these smart contracts.
All right. I remember a project. I don't remember its name, but it was a. I met the group of kids that was building it 2 years ago. ETC 5, I think it was. It was either 5 or 6.
Cool.
I was a part of the hackathon in 6, so 6. Because last year was 7, this year's 8, so 6. Where they had made a platform of one of the big issues and the scary things, especially like within AI of art generation, is that artists are not getting recognition for their art. And so they made a specific marketplace that images are uploaded with the artist identified, and then the item that is generated identifies who was part of that piece. And so as a lot of these new agents are created, is there going to be preferential treatment towards different kinds? Because you used the apps, the Apple App Store as a reference point, and I know you probably just use that as imagery, but one of the things that I just saw, since I'm in the UK, it's all over the UK news. Apple just got defeated on, like, they had to open source their app store for apps, and they're losing, but that's just here in the UK. US, they still have the stranglehold on it. They get to say who gets to build what when. Is Morpheus going to be doing that as well, or is what does that open market look like?
So it's being implemented via decentralized registry in the smart contract. So anybody can permissionlessly register any agent they want. Now, how do you handle, curation? It probably looks a lot like what Uniswap has done. Like at the protocol layer, Uniswap is totally permissionless. They can't stop you from adding any token you want, creating any pool you want. But like if it's clearly a scam, like you want to protect users from that. And so what they do is they don't put it in the front end. So if you know and you're technical enough and you really want to dig in there and do it at the protocol layer, at the protocol layer, go for it. But for the average person, they're not going to put something they think is a scam or malicious into the front end, right?
Or
And
if there's
Morpheus
legal
is going to
troubles
end
with
up
that, they'll remove them from the front end. But you can go use them in a
exactly
different
right.
geo-blocked.
Sure, right. And so, because Morpheus is permissionless, people are going to put up maybe dozens of different marketplaces and dashboards and front ends for all of these smart agents. And, it's up to the people in those jurisdictions to say, oh, ours is pretty permissionless, or, there's no restriction in our country around that, or, use a VPN, it's your friend, right? And you can be from anywhere. And so there's a lot of ways to address that. So you make it permissionless at the protocol layer, and then you let people make those choices at the application layer. Like that was the genius of Satoshi. Every predecessor to Bitcoin was crushed because it was a centralized company. There was no way to do compliance with all the global monetary rules across all the countries. You needed the protocol to be neutral, agnostic, and just permissionless, and let people handle these questions at the application layer. So Morpheus is exactly the same model.
Yeah. Now, and so will that be, and is there going to be, like we talked curation, is there going to be like the more an agent is used, the higher up it will go on the channel or something like that? Or is it just going to be alphabetical and someone's just going to name their agent like quadruple A, or some symbols so it's always in the front?
So I actually thought a lot about this, and last year wrote an algorithm called Smart Rank, short for Smart Contract Rank. And if you want a fair and neutral way to rank these results, you look at on-chain activity. That's what's costly and hard to fake, right? Forget about keywords. It's like how many transactions does it have, right? In the Google context, right, they would look at how many links a website has and how many links that website has, right? You get a real graph of what people are actually using. For here and in Web3, transactions is that lowest common denominator. right? So I can see Uniswap has had 30 million transactions. That's really good validation. It's a real contract that's not malicious. I know it's built on Ethereum and it's non-custodial. Great. That gets a high rank. And this ranking system gets embedded into the Morpheus smart agent, because where this comes in is when you're just talking to your agent, what does it recommend? Well, it can understand your intent, but there might be 50 decentralized exchanges. But I think it's fair if you say the one with the most transactions, built on the best infrastructure, that's non-custodial, right? Lowest risk is definitely what the AI should be recommending. And maybe it gives 2 or 3 options, just like when you asked on Google, it gave you a page of results, and usually it was in the top 10. So the person is ultimately making the choice. But that's, I think you got to do curation. Is what happened to Google over time is that got corrupted. They started selling those top results, right? AdWords, it's how they've always made their money.
Yeah.
But back in the day, it feels like the results were still really good, and they've gone further and further off track as they've wanted to make more money versus give you the best results.
Yep.
And so the cool thing about open source is you can't play that game. Because that's what Google's going to do. They're going to auction off the AI tokens, as in like the language tokens. Oh, somebody asked about, buying a bed. They're going to put your advertisements directly in their AI model, and you're not going to be getting a fair representation of reality. You're going to get a fair representation of what their advertisers paid for you to see. And that's starting to get kind of draconian. Like, we're moving into this weird world in which it's harder for me to see truth. It's harder for me to see reality. And instead, I'm getting this warped version of it. So I think having Morpheus as an open source alternative is key, just like Linux, just like Android, right? Of giving people a way to opt out of these walled gardens.
Yeah. And then just real quick, for people that are requesting to come up, we're gonna in Twitter, I see you and we will get to you shortly as well. We're just sort of finishing up on some of these key points here, and we'll get to you. So and I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring you. But David, one of the things you'd sort of talked on there, and I was remembering back in the day there. So I used to work for, like, I participated in, I was hired out by a couple ICO companies, 2016, 2017. And I remember what, I was given a budget for ad, and you searched for crypto, you found, or ICO, or make money quick. I was in the top 3 results, and I remember because nowadays, sometimes I just go to page 5 of results. And like, I remember you remember back in the day, you used to get like 100 pages of results and stuff like that on Google. And, you sometimes just to see how crazy search results were, you'd go to like page 100 to just sort of see what was being connected to what you were saying. And you're like, that has nothing to do. But now, unfortunately, like page 100 is probably where you find the most truth. And so the big aspect on this, as we have AI, government entities, 3-letter agencies, corporations building out their own AIs or multiple different AIs, finding truth, or having AIs combat each other, is going to be the next warfare in a way, especially on information. So keeping it open source is a really big, important piece. So people can know where the information is, how it's got to that source.
Right.
But right now,
you need an AI that's on your side.
Yeah.
Not on the government side. It's not on a company side. It's like on your side, and it's trying to do the best for you.
Yeah. And so that can be sort of sometimes like a hard thing too, I think, right? To know truth on that. Because if everyone's saying that what they're doing is they're giving the truth, we're getting into this new war of information. So I guess one of the things is, what is Morpheus doing to not just be a participant in that war of truth, but hold itself to a standard?
I think the key is transparency, right? There's always bias, but the key is that disclosed, right? And so you think about the crazy images that came out of Gemini, is it turned out what they were doing is they had sort of provided all these elaborate instructions in the prompts behind the scenes to sort of change what people had asked for and give it all these different qualifiers, right? And that's fine. If that's the kind of model you want, that has all these, strange qualifications that get tacked onto what you're saying, fine. But people should know that's what's happening, right? And so they should have transparency on, like, okay, here's what's happening behind the scenes. And most of these open source models don't have this elaborate attempt to sort of censor what the model is going to give you, right? People can't know how to build a gun. Well, in America, it's okay to own a gun. Like, it's one of those constitutional rights. And so, you should be able to access a model that gives you that knowledge. That is knowledge you could go to the library and pick up a manual. And it's almost crazy enough to say, like, these days a search engine, if it were to come out in 2024, would be characterized as dangerous. Like, let average people have access to information. Like, come on, guys. Like, this isn't any different. It's the same information that was in the library and then was on the internet, and now is just an easy way for you to chat and have that access to that same information. So I find most of the dangerous information stuff kind of absurd. Like, imagine when Microsoft Word came out, and people were like, imagine the mean letters people could write on their computers and then send to others. Like, we must censor this ability to type letters. Like, how crazy would that have been perceived? But that's the same thing that's happening here, right? Some journalist will generate some racist or mean meme and, like, look what the model did. Like, come on, man, the model didn't do that. You wrote that. You
Yeah.
put in that prompt. You created that outcome, and then you're outraged by the thing you created. Like, I could write a mean letter on Microsoft Word and, like, oh, look what Microsoft Word did. Like, come on. You're the one that's imbuing the will. Like, the technology didn't do anything. It was just sitting there.
Yeah. No, and the AIs are keeping things sort of light. I've done a couple of those roast me,
Yeah.
AIs.
On
My
Grok or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, done the grok. My favorite one right now is on Warpcast. Um, it's like roast frame or something like that, and
Yeah.
so it takes a little bit of information from your on-chain activity as well. I got roasted so hard on my degen drop. It's not even. It was like you cheated so early. You missed out on several Tesla trucks. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I did. Thanks.
Exactly.
But as we're starting to see more integrations from multiple different inputs, it's getting really creative with the outputs and stuff like that. And but I think to roll back, UI is so important for people to access this, and I think that's why Grok and ChatGPT, and that now OpenAI rolled Dolly in. To use Dolly, you have to use ChatGPT for that and stuff like that. It makes it so easy for people to use that. That's where the easier it is to use, the more people will do it.
Yep. That's the multiplier, right? There were only 100 million people on the internet pre-Google, 1998. But as soon as you made it so easy, anybody with no technical ability could just ask a question and get a really good answer. You had a billion people on the internet within a few years after that, right? And that's sort of the inflection point that Web3 is at. There are 150, 250 million users, depending on how you define it by wallets. But removing those last technical barriers, I think, is how we get to a billion users.
Yeah. Do you think the billion number is still too big? Is that still a is that it's still a dream piece, you know?
No, I mean, I track on-chain activity the last 12 years in this space, and it's pretty consistently doubled every year. And that was true when there was a million users, and you got to 20 million users, 100 million users, and it's still on that same trajectory. I mean, eventually we'll hit the top of that S curve, right? There are only
Yeah.
8 billion humans, and 5 billion of them online, so maybe 6 billion at this point. So that's like the top of the curve, but we still got a few doublings to go from 200 million to 400 million, 400 to 800. Then real quick you get to 1.6, 3.2, and then you're at the majority of humanity within I think the next 5 years.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about exponentials. When you get to 1%, you're half the way there because it doesn't take many more doublings to go from that 1% to almost 100%. Right? That was true with the internet as well. People paid attention to the dot-com boom and then bust. They're like, oh, that internet thing went away. No, no, no. If you look at the number of users, it never stopped growing.
Yeah.
It just kept growing at that, double every year. And, things just got ahead of itself, right? There were only 100 million users and couldn't justify these crazy numbers. But by the time there were 4 billion people online, it made sense.
Yeah. And yeah, it's people forget the exponential growth of things. Then you always, for the amount of people you can remove, under 18, over 60, but like we want to make this so simple that our grandparents can do it. And then once that happens, we have to, how do we make it safe for those that we deem minors,
Right.
and not minors as in mining Bitcoin miners, but underage children minors.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got kids. I want to protect my kids. I got a 90-year-old grandmother. I want to protect my 90-year-old grandmother.
Yeah. Now, on the information side too, like I just put out a post today because I'd seen, we're in the U.S. We're in election season and we're in full ramp mode of information overload and everyone trying to divert your information, your eyes and your mind in some other way. And it's really hilarious how a lot of people in crypto in the US think that the current political government is, anti-crypto, or anti-blockchain. Yet they put out a release that they're using cryptography to watermark their press releases and their information and stuff like that. I'm like, we're getting them somehow. But one of the things that even Sony built, they forked their own blockchain. They took a star and they forked it so that they could have their own blockchain. They're looking at introducing blockchain directly into cameras for proof of picture,
Right.
And so are we going to get to that point to where we need proof of humanity or will it matter?
I think it will matter. And we do have pretty good proofs. And like you're saying, blockchain and Web3 is the logical way to publish and store those proofs and prove them to other people over time. Right. And I think authenticity is going to matter. You know, I want the picture of my kid. Yes, I could generate a million pictures, of my daughter in a field with flowers, but like there was a real event when we took her and took those pictures with the flowers, right? And so I care about authenticity because it's connected to memory, it's connected to experience, it's connected to a human relationship, right? I mean, what do people do with their cameras? They take selfies. Like you could take a landscape
No,
photo.
don't do
Yeah,
that.
I know. Yeah, exactly. You could take a landscape photo, but really the photo people want of them in the landscape, them at the cool thing, them at the event, right? And so I don't think that's going to go away. And if you have a personal AI, and again, it connected to your Web3 wallet, it's not going to take actions that I didn't approve. right? And so that's actually the key, because most of the non-provable stuff is just spam. It's just low quality. It's just noise, right? And you have to filter that out with cryptography or with a cost, right? And that's what people miss, is these are economic systems, and they're proving your property rights and your ownership in a way that isn't subjective or can't be corrupted by somebody else, right? And that's what I think more and more about, is like, if you want anybody able to own part of this period, open part of, be involved in this infrastructure and own part of these public blockchains, tokens are the only way to do that. And it's an economic force that's grown to what, we're getting close to $3 trillion of tokens, and feel like, oh, it's only $3 trillion. The global economy is 100. Like, I don't think you understand. It doesn't take that many more doublings where most of the world's property are going to move onto these systems in one form or another. Right? Can you imagine any future in 20 years where people don't want the version of the software that is built on smart contracts and is automated and is honest and is transparent? It's like, no. Like, just like 20 years ago, it blew people's mind. Was like, no, everybody's going to have a website. Everybody's going to use a computer. And they're like, why would I need a website? Why would I need a computer? And here we are, right?
Or everyone
Everybody's got a
having, and
computer in their pocket.
we go back even further, everyone having a phone number. No, we just need one phone for the town. Nope.
Yeah.
Like, everyone's only going to have one.
Just one for the house. Just one for the person. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then it goes to, oh, you're just going to need one. And then it turns into, wait, no, I have four right here on my desk, just on my desk,
I know the feeling.
And so people were like, oh, you're only going to need one agent. No, maybe you might have one agent that manages many other agents.
Yep. That's right.
So I'm going to make an assumption here, because I sort of heard when you had mentioned open AI that you had like some like disqualifiers for it that you dislike, and so that might also then roll up to Sam Altman. Dislike? Is he in your fave 5?
I try not to put people on pedestals in general. But I don't think OpenAI still represents the same philosophy or values that they started with. They started with open source. That's how they became who they are today, was they had built an open source community. And when they decided to close source everything, it was sort of a betrayal of their community, right? And the whole philosophy they started with, where this was supposed to be open to everybody. There was already Microsoft. There was already Google. The goal was to create an alternative that was open to all of humanity. That's why it was set up as a nonprofit. It wasn't designed to take 30 billion from Microsoft and sell out as a for-profit, but that's what happened, right? So it kind of feels like everything's had to restart, right? You needed new open source models, but they're quickly approaching the quality and accuracy of GPT-4. I think by July, either with Llama 3 or one of the other models out there, it's going to start exceeding ChatGPT-4, but totally open source, totally available to everybody. Because what OpenAI is doing at this point is they're charging a massive premium for the compute, right? They've got the best model, and so they're upcharging you 10x, 100x, whatever, for the cost of that API. Whereas if it's an open source model, you can run it on your own GPT. You can run it on your own hardware. You can have one of these open source marketplaces like Akash or BitTensor is funding people to train models, right? That's what's going to happen. Is the open source stuff is start out competing the proprietary models, and nobody's going to look back, right? That's the end of the game. And if they don't decide to open source, I don't think they're going to be relevant for 5 or 10 years. They might be building proprietary private enterprise systems for corporates, but they're not going to be providing it to 90% of humanity.
You don't think they're going to be like the Google of chat of agents in a way?
I think they are the AOL. When they've built their walled garden, and if they don't embrace the internet, they're gonna be like AOL.
They
Like
totally.
you
I like that
it's not gonna
thinking.
happen. Like look at servers. 95% of them are now running on Linux. Because why would you pay an operating system fee every time you spun up a new computer? Like it just doesn't scale. And so the vast majority of people in the world, even in Microsoft at this point, has joined the Linux Foundation because they want to be part of 95% of all servers using Linux. What happened with phones? I mean, you could buy an Android phone for $30. If you had to pay an operating system fee or license for every phone, the license would cost more than the phone, which is why 90% of all phones now are running on Android. The same thing's going to happen here. You might start with a proprietary system, but as soon as these open source systems surpass the quality, why would you stick with the proprietary system? 90% of it's going to be open source.
Yeah. So then rolling back to Sam Altman, because I'd had a train of thought there. I wanted to, because we talked about proof of humanity as well. What are your thoughts on WorldCoin?
It's interesting. A lot of people have tried to create these broad distribution token handouts. I remember Aurora Coin back in the day. A lot of people have tried to hook into like KYC or global government ID systems to airdrop tokens to like entire populations. It's a better approach, and most people don't understand it is using zero knowledge proofs. So I don't think it's exposing much about the actual biometrics, but it is using it sort of as a rough proof of humanity. There's about 4 million people that have done it so far. I think there's room for a token like that, but there's a huge pre-mine. It's, heavily controlled and centralized. So it's an interesting approach, but I think if better ways can be found to prove the value people are adding to a system, right? We've moved beyond proof of work where it's just large Bitcoin miners to proof of stake systems. Morpheus is rewarding anybody that contributes code or applications or compute. And there's a scenario where you have, I wrote an article about this a while back, universal earned income.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the response to sort of the UBI impulse, is just to reward everybody, is everybody has something they can contribute. It's called their data. And their data is worth tens of thousands of dollars a year. There's a reason Google's worth trillions of dollars, is because they've been mining all of your data for free, and you have
Yeah.
no concept of how valuable your data is. And so if you can start handing those rewards directly to people, and crypto is the only way you're going to do that, right? Because these are micro transactions. And if you look at Nodal, there's a bunch of mesh network
I love Nodal.
approaches where it's like, let's reward the individual for just having this app and sharing data, and they're all of a sudden part of that revenue.
Yeah. Even older than Nodal. Well, not different, but Coin XYZ. I'm using 10 different move to earn apps. I'm huge in DPIN. I've been in huge in demo for close to 2.5 years now. And helium. I was a helium miner. Look, I actually tried to set up Helium Mobile on my new phone, but because I'm not in the US right now, I can't. And when we were talking geo blocking and stuff like that, as soon as my phone recognized I wasn't in the US anymore, as soon as Twitter recognized I was no longer in the US, I lost Grok. Dang it.
Nope.
And so one of the things that really excites me about projects like Morpheus is the censorship resistance, for the aspect that
Right.
the marketplaces, the other marketplaces that might specialize in something, they might have to geo-block or something like that. But the overall marketplace of Morpheus,
Yep.
doesn't matter who you are,
You
where
can
you are.
run Morpheus local on your own computer. You don't even need an internet connection. And there's this common misconception that you need powerful hardware. But once the model's been trained, you really just need enough RAM to store the model. And so if it's a 7 billion parameter model, you might only need 16 gigs of RAM to run that model. You don't need a GPU. And so these models, these AIs are getting into consumer hardware. Like as of 6 months ago, I think Morpheus was probably the first project where you could put an AI on your own computer and it was just a drag and drop. You didn't need any technical background. You didn't have to use the terminal, right? Just a normal install and chat with the AI model. I think later this year they're starting to get into phones because we're now seeing models that are like 1 or 2 gigs, and they're
Mhm.
still pretty good. And so I think we're going to see that trend continue. So you're going to have a personal AI that nobody can take away from you, that doesn't need external resources. You can use Morpheus right now. Just go to mor.org and download for Microsoft, Apple, or Linux at this point. Doesn't matter what you're using. You can put it on your local machine. You can connect it to your wallet. You can send transactions. Like that just blows my mind altogether. That like we're already at that point. That we're not talking about something that's years away. Like it's there right now,
Yeah.
and that's cool because then I have a personal AI that can never be taken away from me. That's just going to keep getting better, and that all these crypto incentives are paying smart people to constantly improve. And I
Yeah.
only need the network aspects when I want to do something I don't have the hardware for. I want to make a movie. I want to make a picture or something like that. Great. Now I can access somebody's GPU, no matter where it is in the world, and get that done.
All right. And so we have time to show what this dashboard looks like, right? Am I doing this or are you doing
Yep.
this?
Oh, I have it installed, but if you want to share screen, go for it. Just go to mor.org.
Yeah. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna have the fun times and not be try not to do. We're gonna do infinite screen for a minute because we're if you see us once, you're gonna see us many times. GM to Atlas, I see you there. Yes, Paris next week. So we have here. Can you see that correctly?
Yep.
The Morpheus dashboard, really clean and simple, and it's just heck, I think I'll even go back. I can go back
Yeah, to
a piece.
more.org.
Yeah. And you're basically your about, your fair launch, and your download, and the peer-to-peer network for generative AI, as well as your social. So you make it really simple and easy.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
with the fair launch side of things, this will just tell you the same things we've been talking about. That there's no airdrop, no token sale, no NFT. And then going directly into the dashboard for this. Oh, that's for the
Yep.
coder side of things, the compute.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Shows you all the different parts of GitHub.
yeah, and the community, and then the capital pieces.
Yep.
And so current daily
So
reward.
I think it shows there 123,000 staked ETH.
Yeah, that is where it is at right now. And so it's a super simple informational piece and sort of makes it really easy. So you have your whole contract pieces here as well, and you break it all down really clean. But what I want to show here is, like you said, the download Morpheus piece right here. If you're an
If you can
Intel,
zoom in a little bit, it's kind of small. There you
boom, download Morpheus. You have your Linux, your Windows, your Apple. So basic actions, and then you can even go farther. So you don't have a block explorer or price oracles yet, but are you going to be what is the next connection piece for something like that?
So this is the reference implementation of the local version of Morpheus. So you really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to sort of have the crypto primitives in there, the
Yep.
ability to swap tokens, check prices, access smart agents. But ultimately, these are just a tool set for smart agent builders to access. So no
Yeah.
matter what they want to release on Morpheus, it has sort of all the basic building blocks that it needs in order to operate. So, today you can connect your wallet and send ETH, but that's really just giving a reference example to builders to show here's how you make that connection. Here's how you do that, right, for your smart agent. And like you said earlier, you can think of Morpheus as a delegator agent, right? It's really coordinating my access to all the other agents that I want to integrate with. And so, I have a phone and I put the apps on the phone. I have Morpheus, I connect to all the smart agents that I want to use.
Yeah. And right now, it's May 8th, so 31 days till TGE. But after that, people can
Yes.
still stake for more rewards. And that's TGE is when token goes live and tradable, correct?
Right. Because Morpheus has been emitting these tokens the entire fair launch period, right? From February 8th, but they become claimable on May 8th, right? And the idea was to avoid this bottleneck where there are only a tiny number of tokens available day one. You can actually do price discovery. There'll be, more than 1 million Morpheus tokens that will have been emitted, and about 600,000 between the code contributors and the capital contributors. They'll be able to claim those, put them into the Uniswap pool, buy or sell however they want, right? But yeah, that's an important point. May 8th is not the end. It's literally just the beginning of the whole process. And so people will still be able to earn more tokens for the entire 16 years of the supply curve as Morpheus gets emitted. So yeah, absolutely. You can keep your staked ETH in. That's just on May 8th when the tokens become claimable, right?
Yep.
So then you'll be able to withdraw any more that you've earned for staking your ETH.
And now, what are some of the utilities of more 20 token or more token?
So the basic one is people holding more will be able to access AI compute called inference in proportion to their tokens. So let's say you hold 1% of the Morpheus tokens, you could access every day 1% of all the compute people are competing to offer on the Morpheus network, right? So if 10,000 GPUs are competing, you'd have access to 100 of those GPUs, which is a huge amount of compute. And so holding the more token is valuable for accessing AI models, training AI models, sending prompts for chat, generating images, anything you could use an AI for. Think of it as like staking for compute or staking for inference. By holding that more token, you have that pro rata right to the computer of the network. The second thing that's been proposed is more staking. So you'll be able to say, hey, here's the next project I want to support. And I'm going to point my more rewards from the protocol towards that project. And this is an extension of this More 20 framework where people want to launch their project on Morpheus. This is how they can get community support, right? Either they could do that with staked ETH or they could do it with a More token directly. Think back to the early days of Ethereum. What did people want to do with their ETH? They wanted to support more projects that build on Ethereum. So it's the same kind of thing. Like, what do I want to do? I want to support projects, but we can skip all the centralized parties. These more staking rewards will come directly from the protocol, directly to the project that you're supporting. So again, no central treasury. You're not trusting some team with all the money, and you're keeping your more. You're not losing your principal, just like you were keeping your ETH and older direct on the yield. So it's extending that same model, but in the Morpheus context. So
Yeah.
you could think of that as like the capital benefit for holding more. And you could think of the other side as like the compute benefit or the AI benefit to holding more. So just like, yes, I can send transactions with Ethereum and I can use smart contracts. That's my technical benefit. But because there's a staking reward, I can also get a capital benefit, right? So it's this dual asset between the technical and the capital side. And Morpheus is the same thing.
And we talked earlier. So more right now is going to be it's on Arbitrum, and that's just because lower fees, higher transaction throughput, and stuff like that. But looking at going multi-chain at one point, correct?
Yeah, and the white paper was very clear. Morpheus is intended to be chain agnostic. So,
Mhm.
it should get added to Cosmos and Solana and every other chain, though probably the easiest low-hanging fruit is extending it to Base and Polygon and OP Stack and Ethereum mainnet. And so some of the smart contract developers have integrated Layer 0,
Mhm.
their OFT standard. So that's now been implemented into the Morpheus token contract and is being audited right now. I think the audit will probably be done in the next week or two. So right when it launches, it'll already be ready where the community can start deploying the smart contract to other EVM chains. So I wouldn't be surprised if like very quickly more tokens are on Ethereum and Polygon and Base and OP Stack, and it goes way beyond Arbitrum. Though I think for the purposes of like having a deep liquidity, you probably just want the Uniswap pool on one chain per L1.
Mhm.
And so, people could put pools on anywhere, but where does the protocol and liquidity go? For now, that's on Arbitrum, right? And so that's probably where the deepest liquidity for the ETH to more pair to trade, right? And
Yeah.
then we'll see where people go from there. There's been some cool proposals to extend it to Solana. Layer Zero is still integrating Solana. I've heard rumors maybe May or June they'll get to their Solana integration. We'll see. Otherwise, there's other cool tools like Wormhole. There's IBC itself, right?
Mhm.
For the Cosmos ecosystem. I would really love to see yield from Thorchain
Oh.
because that's to me one of the coolest yield sources from real DEX fees. And there's no bridges, it's all native tokens, right? That would be so cool if people with any of those Thorchain tokens could point that yield the Morpheus. That was actually in the original white paper, but there was a technical limitation where you need to be able to point the yield to a different address than the one that owns the principal, which you can do in Lido, but you can't do right now in Thorchain. So Thorchain ends up upgrading to call it multi-output
Mhm.
to multiple addresses for yield. Then you'd be able to extend Morpheus to that as well.
Yeah. Interesting aspect there. I like that, and it moves away from the good old boys of like balancer and curve and those
Mm.
politics. In my opinion, it's its own source and force. Is more like where right now all community driven and everything like that. Will there be proposals or have there been proposals to apply for like STIP or LTIP on Arbitrum or any other parties with other dexes and stuff like that, and emit more rewards to help build up liquidity?
I haven't seen any proposals for extending to those systems. Pretty much the presumption has just been using Uniswap for now.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things you have to keep in mind is that with every extension, Morpheus is also gaining a dependency.
Yep.
And so the current way the proposal, and I think it's MRC 009, or rather MRC 0015, talks about what can qualify. Like the project, like a yield for a source of yield has to be fairly mature.
Mhm.
You want it to be fairly liquid, well proven, well audited. Because imagine if somebody could fake the yield and get credit and get tokens, but that wouldn't be a fair competition, right? So you want to enable as many options as possible without getting sucked into, oh, there was a hack of that system and the attacker put all their yield over here and now they're competing with the real yield providers in
Yeah.
Morpheus. And so you probably end up with like the top most liquid yielding options on each chain, but maybe not the 100th, maybe not
Yeah.
the one that launched last week, right? But get there eventually, and it's an open market. If they end up becoming one of the top options, then it can always be added.
Yeah. Um, I want to roll back for a second. Who's David? Tell me about you.
I am a freedom maximalist,
Okay.
and I will build on whatever tools, blockchains, technology increase human freedom. And I'm a bit of a history nerd. You might have noticed the failed government currencies.
I did see the wall of fiat.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good reminder that all fiat tends towards its intrinsic value of paper. And that's the history, right? Every fiat currency ever has failed. And they typically steal 10 to 20% a year from the people in their jurisdictions. And there is something fundamentally uh, wrong about that. And I want to live in a world in which systems are honest and fair and true. And crypto is so amazing because we have a way to effectuate that. Not debated in politics. I volunteered with Ron Paul back in the end, and we're going to end the Fed. Never happened, right? Because that entrenched interest doesn't want to be reformed. It doesn't want to be fixed, right? For them, for the powerful that are controlling those levers, it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
And so we just have to reinvent the system. And so I see my role the next 20, 30 years is just rebuilding all of these systems and infrastructures to be math-based systems and not violence-based systems. If I can move the world away from state-controlled violence-based systems for human coordination to math-based ones, I think I'll have built a legacy that's worth having.
Yeah. And then, all right. So what's your blockchain history? What got you into blockchain?
Bitcoin 2012. I was an economics nerd, and I heard there was a currency that couldn't be inflated by politicians, and it was controlled by math. And I said, how do I change all my green pieces of paper into that? And it took me about 4 months, but I was able to convert my cash into Bitcoin. And that, obviously 2013, it appreciated a lot, gave me the opportunity to start investing in all these protocols. Started one of the first angel groups in the space, Bit Angels, in 2013.
With Turpin,
Wrote the
right?
paper with Turpin and a bunch of others. It was at the very first Bitcoin Foundation conference in San Jose, May of 13. And there's Roger and Vinny and Eric Voorhees and all the OGs. And what did we want to do with our Bitcoin? We wanted to reinvest in Bitcoin companies and Bitcoin protocols, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up writing the paper on decentralized applications and proposing that framework at the end of 2013. And that, sort of adopted by the Ethereum community as yes, this is the test if it's really decentralized. Is it open source? Is it peer-to-peer? Does it have a token? Is it built on a blockchain? Right. And that simple sort of litmus test proved a really good sort of framework for language. And that got propagated and everybody started talking about dApps and building decentralized systems. And so it's given me this cool opportunity to sort of contribute to each of the protocols as they've emerged and what can I add to them either on the economics, on the token systems, on the technology stacks. So I write white papers, I look at code on GitHub, I'm fairly technical, but I try to also communicate it in a language that, people with capital can understand or the end users can understand.
Yeah. The founders, like Turpin, Bobby Lee, Blasco. It's great to see how the evolution of things have happened. So I have sort of like your wall of failed currency. I have a wallet of failed chains. I like to say, what out of all these years, what was one of the most favorite chains or least favorite that failed that you saw?
Well, and just to draw the distinction, these currencies are mandated by law and enforced at the point of a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And the chains that may have failed or didn't take off the way you wanted, they were all voluntary. And we can opt in and out of these systems peacefully. We can experiment. I think of them like startups, right? 9 out of 10 startups fail. Doesn't make startups, a bad framework. It just makes them an experimental, high-risk framework. right? And I think of crypto in the exact same way. Is these are programming languages. They have different trade-offs, and I helped with some of the first ever second layers that got built on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and some of them launched in like 2015, way too early, before any people cared about second layers because fees weren't high yet. Um, and so you could say, oh, well, that didn't take off, but they proved the technology. They, validated the concepts. They created a lot of the technology. And then eventually, when that use case became urgent and fees started going through the roof, all of a sudden people cared about second layers. So I don't want to name and shame projects that didn't succeed, because I think if they were honest efforts built in good faith, they all contributed to running experiments, right? It's the old Thomas Edison, like, how did you keep working on that light bulb after you failed 2,000 times? He's like, I didn't fail 2,000 times. I figured out the 2,000 times it didn't work.
Yeah.
That's how you get to the one that works best. And so it's like, I'm okay with there being thousands of experiments in crypto. I think the important thing is to differentiate for people what they're doing. If they're investing and putting their assets in a project that is super early stage, they're speculating, right? They're experimenting, and it's very high risk, which is very different than if, oh, I just wanted to hold my money in something honest. Great. Bitcoin, Ethereum, there are good, sort of well-established projects with long histories that you could say represent money and honest money. Versus, oh, I'm an early stage investor and I want to participate in some really highly speculative thing. You have to understand what you're doing and what you're participating in. But that's okay. I mean, the average person used to have access to early stage capital formation. Microsoft was only worth $300 million when it came out, and now it's worth $3 trillion. I looked at the stats at one point, something like 15% of all Americans at one point had owned Microsoft shares. And you used to be able to do that when a company was early stage. But the public markets have become so bureaucratic. Nobody goes public until they're worth tens of billions of dollars. And people have basically missed out on most of the early stage growth and capital formation. And so the reason I think people are so excited about crypto is they can finally participate again in the early days. And yes, that's risky. And yes, 9 out of 10 of them won't work, but it gives them a fair chance to support the best projects that do.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's really revolutionary, right? I'm lucky to be born in a time in which I can access that.
You brought up two important pieces there that I really appreciate, both the intrinsic layer of capital formation, and I think that that's what crypto really blockchain allows for, which is really important, because people can put skin in the game, and that's sort of what more sort of makes it, permissionless, but not necessarily, risk-free. Something could happen to Lido, and you talked about security audits are happening right now, and even companies that get security audits still get hacked. Last major one, I know there's been a bunch, and people can get drained all the time, but Kyber swap had been around for a few years and still exploited.
It's maybe worth spending a second then on the protection fund, because this is one of the coolest things that I liked about Morpheus.
That's what I'm rolling to. Yeah.
This is one of the things that got me excited about the white paper, is the authors proposed 4% of all the more emissions should just automatically go into a protection fund. Because even Bitcoin had accidental hard forks in the early days. And Gavin Andreessen paid those miners out of his own pocket or out of the Bitcoin Foundation to try to make them like, sorry about that hard fork where you lost out on those rewards. So why not build in a protection fund from the very beginning? And the way the authors proposed it is, if there is a hack, the developers who have contributed code act as an oracle, validate that attack actually happened, and can distribute the value that's accrued in the smart contract to the people affected, right? And I think that's really smart. There's also been proposals to diversify the protection fund, not just to hold more, but some of it should be in Ethereum, some of it should be in stable coins, because the market goes up and down a lot. At the moment of greatest vulnerability, when there's been an attack and probably the price has been affected, you still want to be able to make whole the people that were affected, right? And so I think that's really smart. Having a built-in protection fund from day one also set up an easy way to do bootstrapping of the Uniswap pool,
Mhm.
because who should be able to offer there more? If you let any person do it, it would be unfair, but have the protection fund do it. It gains some liquidity. It puts those more in to initiate the Uniswap pool, and everybody's benefiting because it's bootstrapping the liquidity, and the Ethereum on the other side, the yield that's been accrued goes into the protection fund, pays for more audits. I think there've already been 4 or 5 audits of the Morpheus code base, but every time there's a change to the contract, they need to be re-audited, right? So
Yep.
you need a recurring source to pay for that security, because nobody wants to do it out of their personal pocket, right? And so there's got to be some way for the protocol to fund that type of activity.
Is there going to be continuous bug bounties as well?
Bug bounties. Also, there's bug bounties where you run a specific program. There's also like a responsible disclosure. Like
Yep.
you find some vulnerability, there's, it's like devs at more.org or whatever, or you can go onto the GitHub and you could privately message some of the smart contract developers and say, hey, I found a bug, and you will get a nice big reward out of the protection fund. It has to have been a real bug. It has to have been a real vulnerability, but you want a way to reward people for good faith reporting, right? White hat hackers to be going after and trying to find those vulnerabilities long before the bad actor shows up.
Yep. And so then the question is, since this is an AI project, how many AI agents do you think are going to be attacking this?
I don't see a lot of near-term ways an AI could attack this system, because what you're really saying is, who's going to build AIs that attack smart contracts?
Mhm.
Because Morpheus is implemented through today smart contracts on Ethereum, right? It doesn't have its own blockchain. It's instantiated using these smart contracts. So are people going to build AIs to find zero-day vulnerabilities? Probably, but they're probably also going to go after any software that has capital, right, where they can cash in on 0 days attacks. So, but I haven't seen a lot of use cases where that makes sense, because one, these AI systems are non-deterministic, and they don't tend to discover new things. They can only reflect the data they were trained on. And so you'd have to give the AI a huge amount of data, and probably the most sophisticated is something like GitHub's Copilot,
Mhm.
because it's ingested millions of programs and it's seen those functions a lot of time, and it can give you a good suggestion of how to fix your code. You'd need somebody that is a bad actor that's doing a similar level kind of training, and then trying to use the knowledge in the reverse way, showing where, how to exploit these bugs, right?
Yeah.
But the key is, you want to give more resources to good AIs than bad AIs. So I wrote a paper about this in 2016. How does humanity survive the coming of strong AI? And I made the case in 2016, it's blockchains. This is all about resources. How do you defeat attackers in Bitcoin? You paid the good miners lots of rewards, and the game theory has to work out that they make more money being a good actor than a bad actor. And that's going to be exactly the same deal for AI. If we align the incentives and anybody can run the AIs, and you make a lot more money by being a good actor than a bad actor, then we're set.
So I got into Bitcoin in 2013, specifically almost for that point. I was at a point in my life where I was wanting to do good, and I was like, I wasn't a religious person, or like, my moral compass was still being built and defined. and literally had mathematical proof that says it proves to be better to do good than it does to do
Yep.
bad. And I was like, I get that. This
Yep.
gets me. I found my paper, you know. And you know, so for me, consistency and transparency, the foundations of blockchain, you know, are sort of what I try to live on, you know. Does that mean I fall behind? Oh, heck yeah. I'm a human. You know, I can only handle so many conversations at once, and others, you know, you know, I'm still finding conversations I missed from ETH Denver. You know, I don't, you know, and you know, I cannot wait. But then it's weird because we get ingrained with these being security conscious that we don't want to give up control and access because, you know, who knows what that agent might learn, who's reading what that agent learns, type of thing, you know. How many private, you know, if it has overlay, how many private keys is it going to see? You know, does it make itself dumb, you know, blinded by private keys, you know, or seed phrases? How does that happen, you know, so it doesn't remember it, you know? But one of the big questions that, or not big questions, but counter arguments politicians make and stuff like that right now, you know, like with TikTok, the recent law or proposed law is to like ban TikTok, and they made it very broad so that they're saying it's targeted for TikTok, but it just says applications, you know, to censor applications, because the fear that they say is TikTok knows you better than you know yourself, and its algorithm, its AI, learns what to show you. And I don't actually see that as a bad thing. If it's something that says I'm going to like the next video, and it will find to where I'm in a constant mood of enjoyment or enjoying what I'm seeing, I'm not going, like me personally, I'm not going to TikTok to like feel bad about myself, you know.
Right.
I want to go see little puppy pictures sometimes, you know. But there's that fear that there's that censorship that's going to come into play. What is one of the biggest things that you see that won't be a middle finger to regulations and the government? Because I don't think that that's necessarily the long-term solution. I think incentivization, integration will be the long-term solution. Where do you see that incentive model coming from, or that work together model, I guess?
I think the key is to make it an individual human right. This is just you. Like, your AI is an extension of your data, it's an extension of your requests. It's writing or creating what you asked it to make, right? And so, at least in the US, you know, there's guarantees around free speech, there's guarantees around, you know, the privacy of my papers and effects, you know, without due process. And so I think that's the key, is that that's the framework, is every time they try to introduce these censorship or restrictions, you know, it usually doesn't stand up in the courts, right? They tried to ban encryption in the 90s, and that didn't stand up in the courts, right? Famously, Phil Zimmerman open source PGP, and he went to court in 95 and defended, hey, I can print a book with these numbers in them. I can print a t-shirt with these numbers in them. Like, you can't stop this information. And at least in the 90s, the judges were like, yeah, we're not going to ban books and t-shirts and language and math. Like, that's not going to work. And so eventually the government gave up at the appellate level. They never appealed it to the Supreme Court because they probably didn't want the precedent from the Supreme Court that, you know, the First Amendment's still a thing, at least in the US, or at least was in the 90s. And so we're seeing that same thing play out again, right? This executive order is introducing KYC for data centers, restrictions on AI models, parameter sizes, compute amounts. the craziest one is in July, the Commerce Department will decide if open source weights constitute dual use weapons. And literally, the database of words calculated by the AI could be considered a weapon. Like, that's 1991 all over again, right? Like, that's one so crazy and broad and insane that it can't stand in the courts, but they might fight it for 5 or 10 years, pretending like that's not unconstitutional. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But if that happens in July, it's just going to crimp US AI development. It's going to move to the UK. It's going to move to Switzerland. It's going to move to Singapore. It's going to move anywhere else where you can still do innovation without having to get permission from the government to use words or math, right?
Yeah.
The societies that ban words and math don't tend to do very well, And so, again, Morpheus is adopting that same ethos as Bitcoin. Separate the protocol from the application layer. If people can do it peer-to-peer in a fully decentralized way, there's no realistic way to stop it. If they're offering a centralized service to somebody, okay, that might be regulated. But if you're doing something fully peer-to-peer, there's very few regulations that apply to your activity, right? It's when there's a custodian. It's when there's a counterparty. It's when you're trusting somebody else with your money, then there's a lot of regulations that come in. And so I think AI, we can take the knowledge we've learned in crypto the last 12 years, and so many of those lessons become applicable to AI and AI builders this year who haven't had to deal with these regulations and restrictions. All of a sudden, it's going to come down like a ton of bricks later this year when these regulations go into effect.
Yeah. How do you, with like some of your partners coming up, obviously TLI, the Lifted Initiative and stuff like that, or 6079. And I had a list of I had a list of other partners that I don't know where I left that list.
Sure.
But who are some of the cool partners you guys have that you're excited about?
There's so many people building in the Morpheus context. I've almost lost track of all the projects that have made announcements. There's no formal concept of partnership in Morpheus because who would they partner with? There's no foundation. There's no company. There's no press release to make. It's like sort of saying like, we've partnered with Ethereum. Like, okay, cool. You're writing a smart contract on Ethereum. Most people aren't like, partnering with the foundation, or the Ethereum Foundation. And so that's the key, is you don't need anybody's permission. You can build whatever you want in the Morpheus context, connected into the compute, connected into the capital. A lot of what people want to do is just do what Morpheus did. Like, oh, I want to do a fair launch like that. I don't want to have to go to Switzerland. I don't have to create a foundation. I don't have $500,000 to pay to lawyers. How do I do one of these fair launches, right? And so generalizing these more 20 contracts for anybody to be able to launch their own fair launch, just like Morpheus did, I think that's the immediate way people can work in the Morpheus context, is to adopt the same best practices for raising capital. And then it looks like the decentralized router will probably be like June, July. And as soon as that comes out, people are going to be able to use the compute. And you can think of it almost like an aggregated layer across all the decentralized compute networks. Morpheus is agnostic. You want to use Akash or BitTensor, go for it, right? Morpheus smart agents are consuming that compute, right? It's not competing with those systems. It's a user of those systems. So if you're a fan of BitTensor and Akash, you should love Morpheus. You should really want it to succeed because that's the user for all these models and for all this inference, right? And so that's the cool thing, is there's so much collaboration going on because there's no barrier. There's no NDA. There's no partnership agreement with a company. There's no negotiations. Like, you want to use the open source, go for it. And that's been amazing to see how fast things have gone when you remove all those barriers.
Yeah. I remember late last year, I met these two kids that I met them on a Monday, and they had made their GitHub public on Friday. And it already had over like 1,500 forks and like 7,500 stars, because they had made and trained basically a Bloomberg live stream Bloomberg terminal for crypto,
Nice.
Fin GPT. And people were already sourcing it out and stuff like that and creating their own dashboard pieces for it. And I like that those pieces like that, and it's just one of those really amazing and fun things to see. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments. Let us know. If you want to come up on stage and ask, please put in a request. We've been going we've been almost 2 hours now, David, and it didn't seem like that long, and I just realized it's dark outside, but yeah, if anyone has any questions, if not, I want to maybe start wrapping this up a little bit, just because be conscious of what you're building and doing and stuff, and time is of the essence at times,
Yep.
So
it's been a great conversation, man. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, Lifted does whatever it can, and so we're just here to help in every way, shape, or form, and really drive interest or answer questions, because people might already be interested, but the question is, what more can I do? How do I and so I'm actually just I'm gonna delete that, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to actually just post out the more.org, MOR.org. And this is where you guys can start and figure out where Morpheus fits into your life. Doesn't mean it has to, but everyone complains about not being early. Everyone complains about not having a fair chance. The only fair chance, I'm sorry, is that you didn't learn about this February 7th, so that you were ready February 8th when everything started. Yeah, so today's the day that you get to start being you. And David, I want to thank you so much for your time. What's one of the coolest things, maybe outside of AI, outside of Morpheus, what's something that's on your radar right now? And yeah.
I'm a space nerd, so I've been going to all the Starship launches, which, if you haven't seen, is twice the size of the Saturn V, the largest rocket ever, 10 million pounds of fuel. And the thing goes off, like you can feel it in your chest, like 3 miles away. So, I don't know, just random thought, but, space is incredible. I mean, what an incredible time to be alive. Between advancements in space and crypto, what's going on with, genetic editing and everything else. Like, man, I'm excited about so many of these trends that can create huge abundance. I'm a big fan of longevity. Like, it's like, these are just all engineering problems we can solve.
Yeah.
We don't have to be passive participants in life. We can make life whatever we want. Like, let's go ahead and do it. And so that's why I'm so big on freedom. It's like the places where you can just act and improve, man, those are the places to live, right? I mean, so many people, it seems like they're down on the US, like, oh, things are going so terribly. I don't know where you live, but they're building 20 skyscrapers downtown in Austin. Like, everybody's moving here. They're launching giant rockets a few hours south. Like, things like are pretty cool here. Like, if you feel that way, you should really get to a place that embraces your values more, and that is building and is entrepreneurial and doing innovation, versus just sitting around watching a city decay. Like, that's one of the big choices in life, man. Where do you want to live? And that has a huge impact on the people you're surrounded by and the opportunity that you have. So I don't know. I'm so excited for the future. I am extremely optimistic. And I try to remind people the future is much bigger than the past. Like, people, like you said, think they've missed out. I thought I missed out on the .com bubble. Man, I should have done my year 15 better. Like, I was just a little too young to really participate. But it turned out the thing after that was bigger, and the thing after that was bigger, and crypto is bigger than that, and AI is adding a whole new dimension. there are more people online now. There's more capital being created. There's more cool technology now than ever before. Like, we are so lucky to be alive right now. So yeah, just keep being awesome, keep building, try stuff out. That's the best thing you can do.
Trying stuff out is some of the funnest things to being able to do. Um, it's funny you brought up space and watching. I haven't made a launch yet. It's on my, I don't want to say bucket list, but it's on my to dos.
Sure.
Maybe I think about a month and a half ago or so, I interviewed a founder of Future Stuff Inc. I think if I remember right. And one of the projects they're doing is they're working with satellite companies on doing blockchain in space, putting up the gas stations basically for satellites that will then communicate via QR code and pay for fuel on blockchain, space chain. I'm just making that up. It's not space chain. I don't know what it's going to be called, but just some of the cool stuff that isn't necessarily here on Earth, but it's out there already. And there was have you watched the 3-Body Problem yet?
Yep.
Yeah. There one of the lines was, if one of us survives, we all survive.
Mm.
And I feel the same way with blockchain. There's Bitcoin nodes in space, deep in the ocean, behind people's microwaves. And I just read about one. They used a bad headline. But it was a Game Boy. Now instead it's not even a full validator, but it's like some mining opportunity. It's not a miner per se, but it's just, I'm like, yeah, it's everywhere. And then I love the little Cricket miners, the little Raspberry Pi miners and stuff like that. There's just, like you said, it's an exciting time to be alive. And I liked how you put, if your city's decaying, there's other places to be.
Yep. I moved. I'm really glad I moved to Austin. Spent 3 years in Puerto Rico. That was amazing. I will move anywhere on the face of the earth or beyond in order to participate in the most disruptive thing that's ever happened in human history. I'm not going to miss that out because of my zip code, right? That wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah. And the fact that we have to, get multiple different, not identities, but country origination papers to be able to participate in different platforms is sort of interesting. But that hopefully that won't always be the case. David, I've super enjoyed this time with you. This show ends the same way every episode, 2 ways. It ends with words of wisdom, and I have the best, worst knock-knock joke on the face of the planet. So since you are here, and I don't see any questions or anything like that, anyone wanting to come up, David, final thoughts and words of wisdom.
I've been through a lot of crypto cycles. One of the best words of wisdom I heard from a friend was live 90% below your means, right? There's a lot of people that are going to do well in 2024, 2025. Who knows how long the ride lasts? But these are highly volatile markets. And so skip the Ferrari, skip the Lambo, don't waste your money on depreciating assets, try to build real wealth. And the most valuable thing is honestly understanding how these systems work, right? And you're not going to get all right your first cycle, but if you're somebody really dedicated to these principles, you'll stick it out past the next bull market, past the next bear market, and you can apply everything you learn to the next time around. And again, it's not a one-time thing. These cycles are going to keep on going and keep on growing. So, stay humble, stay driven, stay passionate, and live by below your means, be smart.
All right. I like that.
I had a website, and my tagline was literally "No free Lambos."
No free Lambos. Okay.
Yeah, it's all
No
hard
free
work.
Lambos.
It's all hard work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not I love looking at Lambos, but they just don't have the ground clearance.
Yeah.
We don't have the infrastructure in place for me to feel like I can go anywhere. I'd be like geo-blocked having a Lambo, you know?
Give me a Cybertruck. Yeah, I want something that's invincible and bulletproof. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, as always, my words of wisdom are always the same. A closed mouth cannot be fed, and you cannot feed a closed mouth, meaning if no one knows you're looking for opportunity, opportunity can never come a knocking. If opportunity does come knocking and no one answers, it's going to keep on walking. And I was going to end us with the best, worst knock knock joke, but we did have someone come up to request. You got a couple more minutes to answer. Who knows? They could be selling potatoes. We're going to bring up Ryan. Let's let Ryan join real quick. GM Ryan, how are you today, sir? They're still connecting. Oh, now they're here. Ryan, can you hear us? You are on mute.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks for such an informative session. I just had a question, if I may.
Yeah.
Great. David, first off, thanks for creating such a project which aligns with so many ethos in terms of decentralizing AI with all the legislation that these top corporations are putting into practice. I think really the time is now. I got involved in Bitcoin back in 2012. I'm contributing into the capital pool. It's not very often I get excited about something like this. So, yeah, props to you, man. A very short question I had. I want to contribute more to the network in terms of using the more tokens that will be available on May 8th and then spinning up a node. Through reading through the documents which Ryan from Limerin put together, there was a line in there which said people providing compute are only able to take 1% out in terms of the rewards per 24 hours. So I was just trying to understand that if I was running a node and I had 100 or 1,000 more staked, and I generated, say, for instance, 100 that day, as an example, is it true that only one of those would be claimable every 24 hours?
Really great question, and thanks for the thoughtful review of the paperwork. It's always nice when you can kind of get into the details. And just to clarify, the 1% is not related to you withdrawing your rewards for providing compute. It has to do with the resources that are available from the smart contract. So think about it this way. Let's say 100,000 Morpheus tokens have built up in the compute contract. Every day, 1% of that is available for everybody to use on the network. So if 100,000 are in the contract, 1,000 more of resources are available to pay compute providers. So if everybody were using their proportion of the inference, it would pay out 1,000 more that day to spread across all the compute providers. Now, once you've earned that more, you've got that in your individual private key. You can use it. I don't think there's a plan for any lockup. So you should be able to take those rewards and claim them whenever you want. But it has to do with, like, imagine a huge amount of more is built up in the smart contract. You don't want some attacker to run a bunch of inference just to claim a bunch of tokens to try to push down the price. So by only having 1% of the reserve available, you sort of smooth things out, right? Where demand can increase, but it doesn't spike in these huge ups and downs, and people can kind of play a game with that reserve. So I think that's a pretty smart way. Maybe that number will get adjusted over time, but seemed like a good starting point. And at least the way it looks from the implied value of more based on the yield that's been contributed, seems like there are going to be a lot of resources available for compute, which is really cool. Anybody holding more will have access to a ton of models and a ton of inference.
We got a thumbs up from Ryan. Yeah, because where I had sort of heard from what he was saying, and the way he was interpreting it was that I could only withdraw 1% of what I earn, but you're saying it's 1% of the total capital of that day.
Right. The 1% of the total more tokens in the smart contract. So if there were 100,000 in the contract, 1,000 could be rewarded that day. So it's really just about calculating how much rewards are available for people to earn. But once they've earned their rewards, they're rewards. There's no, slow unlock or anything.
All right. Ryan, did that answer your question or any follow-up?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around how that would function. So if there's 1,000 nodes, I own one of the nodes, and for example's sake, we all earn one more, then of the one more that I've earned, can I use that more as in terms of withdrawing, or is it 1% on the 10,000? That's kind of where I'm getting a bit confused.
Once you've earned it, you can withdraw it whenever you want.
So yeah,
where does the 1% cap come in then?
The amount of more that can be rewarded that day versus the entire reserve, right? So, for example, more tokens have started for compute since February 8th, right? At the same time that all the other emissions started. And they've just been building up in that smart contract at 3,456 tokens a day, or at least that was the original emissions rate. And so by the end of day 90, they're going to be 320,000 tokens already sitting in the compute contract. So those are all resources people can use in the future. So let's say the compute contract goes live in June, and there's 400,000 tokens that have built up in the contract. You don't want to make that entire reserve available every day. You want to make a portion of it available. Again, so people can't play a game with, sort of spiking the usage. So 1% is the amount of the reserve. So 400,000 tokens have built up in the contract, 4,000 more would be available each day for people to access that inference. And again, remember that the payments are going from the protocol to the compute provider. They're not coming from the individual. The individual is just holding their more, and a benefit of holding their more is they get access to that compute. They get access to that inference.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I do want to say I appreciate the kind words. Though I think people often give me too much credit. The anonymous authors, Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo, dropped this brilliant paper, sent it to a bunch of people in the smart agents community. And I've been really passionate about explaining this to people. And I'm one of the most active open source contributors. But there are like 200 people writing code. There are 5,000 people providing capital. A lot of people follow Eric Voorhees and have listened to him talk about this. So I'm doing my part, but I can by no means claim some special position, nor do I want some special position. I'm happy to be an open source contributor, a capital contributor, and I'm right there competing with everybody else to see Morpheus become successful.
I think though the praise sort of gets put on the face usually. And the person, because then we're expected to disseminate it backwards, to those, that don't show their face and or who aren't in front of everyone else. So that you will get that a lot, David.
It's appreciated, and I hope it, the credit goes to all those people writing the code and all those people building out Morpheus. But I think it's important just to state, because Morpheus being a neutral protocol with no CEO, not run by any company, not controlled by any particular protocol, makes it fair for everybody to use, right? I mean, that was the beauty of Bitcoin, is we were all Satoshi, right? We were all doing our part, right? There wasn't some marketing department that we thought was going to tell people about Bitcoin. Like, we told our families, we told our friends about Bitcoin because we thought it was fair and honest and cool and something we wanted to see in the world, right? And I think that's kind of the energy the Morpheus community has, is like that 2012 kind of energy where I'm telling all my friends because I'm excited about it, and there is no Morpheus marketing department. There is no company. And so, like, we are all Morpheus. And I think that whole dynamic is really cool because it empowers you to build whatever you want.
Awesome. Ryan, any other follow-ups on that, or did that get, did you get answered?
Yeah, the answer's great. I've really been upset. I've gone into a rabbit hole with this, and it's really a breath of fresh air. The space at the moment is littered with meme coin mania, and I'm just too old and too slow, and I can't keep up with that. So it's great to see the participation. I think the project is still flying under the radar of a lot of the space, which I'm all for. I think it will naturally come out without the need of some of the, how could you phrase it, some of the influencer type of personas in this space. What we're building here is, as you can see, it's a 16-year plus emission schedule. So, yeah, I know, as you've said, there's 200 plus people working on it, but the way that you articulate what is actually happening is just a testament to the project. So you're probably the front-facing person of it all, even though there is, as you stated, 200 people running it. So, yeah, I'll continue to contribute, and yeah, I'll continue to listen to the spaces. But that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
Awesome, man. Appreciate it.
I want to touch on something. Ryan sounds like he's contributing at a technical level, or hardware level. And so in the GitHub, there's other ways people can contribute as well on a non-technical level, or even but they can contribute like either on like a marketing, but what's really cool, also event level as well, to earn more token. We were going to end with the greatest worst knock joke, but I'm going to push that for a second. The GitHub is probably the end all be all, but what are some of the other ways people can contribute to the success of Morpheus, and or earn through participation?
So the cool thing about the white paper, it outlined 4 ways that you could contribute, right? And we've talked a lot about the capital side, but the code side is equally important, right? So anybody that contributes code to one of the Morpheus reference implementations, right, like helps write the smart contracts, help write the example smart agents, creates the decentralized router like Ryan's doing. All of that gets rewards in the network. 24% to each of those 4 buckets. So 24% to code, 24% to capital, 24% to compute, people running those computers, and then 24% to people building the applications and front ends. And so you can basically do almost anything and get rewarded in Morpheus out of one of those different buckets. We're in phase 1 right now, where it's rewarding code and capital. And the next upgrade is compute, right? That's why everybody's watching the work that Ryan at Lumerin is doing. Is as soon as that goes live, you'll be able to run a GPU, provide compute, and compete to earn more tokens for running AI models. And then in phase 3, if you want to build a smart agent, you want to release a website, an app, an interface for Morpheus, all of a sudden you can get rewarded for that, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're a website builder or a backend coder or somebody that just has a GPU or has staked ETH, you can participate in any of these ways. And honestly, that's so refreshing. So many projects have been sucked into only being run by like capital people or only being run by compute people, proof of work, proof of stake. But most people forget the developers. Most people forget the community of builders that are actually building on these. And I haven't seen a project, honestly, since Ethereum that so heavily prioritized developers and community as Morpheus has, right? I mean, people forget Ethereum, yeah, they did a token sale. Yeah, they had miners, but so many of the ETH went to early developers that contributed before the Genesis block. Like, if you so much as commented on something, they got you rewards, right? Because they understood that the key was building that mind share with developers and community. And that's why they won. More than any technical thing, it's because they built a very large inclusive community and didn't just reward a couple of insiders with all the rewards is the key. And so it's been awesome to see that with Morpheus. So yeah, go to more.org. You can follow the dashboard. You can go to the Discord. There are channels in Discord for every one of those categories I just talked about, and hundreds of people in there figuring out how to contribute.
I know the other day when we were looking at it, realized two things. There was no Paris event channel and there was no French language channel. I contributed.
Right. We got to fix that. Yeah, we got to contribute that. Yeah, even in the code rewards, put out that, building a local community of developers and people in each city was important. So, I think Anton or one of the other guys suggested we should have a reward. Part of the code reward should be building those local communities. And so there's a couple of weights set aside for every city that you do the first Morpheus meetup. Like, you can put your ETH address in there and get rewarded, right? That doesn't scale. Morpheus doesn't pay influencers, but giving sort of anybody around the world a decentralized way to participate, I thought that was really cool. And then, if people find it value, they're going to do the meetups. Like, whose permission do you ask to do a Bitcoin meetup? Nobody. You just do it, right? The same with Ethereum, right? And so you really want that same kind of culture and spirit in Morpheus.
And that is why I'm putting on a Morpheus event with many other Wednesday in Paris. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Which I believe the link is in Discord. So if they follow the Discord, they'll find that.
Yeah, definitely. They'll find it on Discord. Yeah, it's going to be a small event, but you never know. If you're in town for Paris Blockchain Week or something, stop by. David, thank you for the time. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I want to thank everyone at LinkedIn, 0x Degens, Player One Taco, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter video, Unlonely, Rumble, Kick, Telegram, and Discord, where we're all streaming this video to, for joining in, participating, watching, asking questions, throwing up hearts and emojis. Please, the Morpheus account didn't join us this time, but please, if you want to find out more, you can either on the Twitter post, Morpheus AI, please give them a follow, see what they're building. Also, the Lifted Initiative, which is in the crowd, that is who I represent, and what we're building in the back end to support the decentralization of AI, but also the hardware availability. So just so much going on, and it's an amazing time, like you said, to be alive. And I am going to now disappoint everyone with the greatest, worst knock-knock joke on the face of the planet. And since you're here, David, you get to help me with this. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on episode 596, Decentralized AI with Morpheus. Knock, knock.
Who's there?